Először üdvözlök mindenki tekintve magyarul, mivel a Collegium Hungaricumban vagyunk. Zweitens begrüße ich unsere Gäste auf Deutsch, weil wir in Berlin sind. And thirdly, I'm greeting our guests in English, because English will be the language of this event. Let me have a very short introduction to this event. That is, Cinema Total is the fourth time that we are organizing at Collegium Hungaricum. We have tried to establish a sort of a platform for the presence of Hungarian cinema during the Berlinale, in the context of the Berlinale. During the years we have opened up this sort of institution that we have created and embraced the region as well. That is to say, we are trying to give a platform, a place for regional cooperation. This time, Cinema Total is, as last year we had already Slovakian and our Romanian friends. This time I'm very happy that our Austrian friends, or more precisely the Viennese Film Fund, is taking part in this event, and Serbia is present as well. So it is called Calling Neighbors. To call neighbors is very important. This is our conviction. Neighbors can exchange ideas. Neighbors can exchange thoughts and energies. Now, this year's Cinema Total we have started in May, very early on, and a lot of things have happened since May in the European, in the regional, and especially in the Hungarian film business. And as Cinema Total is a platform for and about film business, it was a logical consequence that we sort of deal with the questions that arose in these last times. I have to tell you that we have been doing a lot of work to organize this special event, and I have to thank everybody, each and everybody who is present and with whom we were talking in these last weeks, days, months. Everybody was very open and very helpful and very tolerant, and said, yes, this is an occasion that could be an interesting platform for information and exchange of thoughts. So that was my introduction, and I will give. That was the introduction we were talking about. That is okay. 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 So and now I give the mic to Mono Rimész András, who will guide us through the afternoon.
Welcome, everybody. First of all, some technical questions. Everybody has a translating machine which works, so nobody's unhappy with the little earphones. Okay? Right. So this afternoon, what we would love to try to do here, we would love to show the options what we have in Europe to the government subsidies, which are the most efficient ways to spend the taxpayers' money. And also we would love to show, that little countries like Hungary, who has a limited market, I would say very small market, and a special language, which is also a kind of limitation of the distribution, how can they kind of support their national production in the audiovisual industry? What kind of support they can give for the different sectors? So this reason we invited, 4 directors of different institutions in Europe. First of all, I would love to introduce you Henrik Bo Nielsen. He's coming from Denmark, and he's the director of the Danish Film Institute. Also worked for the think tank of audiovisual processes, and he will speak about that too. We have Voje Hribar from Croatia, and he's the director of the Audiovisual Center in Zagreb. And we have Peter Zavrel from Vienna, the Vienna Film Fund, the Austrian neighbors. And we have Simon Perry, who is was working, a long time together with the Irish Film Fund, who has many experiences also in a little country like us. So we have also two representatives of the government side of the Hungarian government. First of all, we have the recently appointed government commissioner, Andrew Vajna, who is a producer who has a well-known career in Hollywood, and he was coming back to Hungary. So he will have, to build up a new strategy in the country. And we have Attila Bokor also, who is working for the Culture Ministry, which has a funny name. I won't explain to everybody, but it means that, we have a ministry who deals with education, health, and culture. And he's working for the Secretary of State of Culture and responsible about the film affairs in the country. So we have also lots of professionals from Hungary, producers, directors. Also we have European and German producers here in the room. Just a few words about the agenda. We will try to get through, to give a quick overview of the European organizations, how they work, and then we will try to understand our situation now, what's really going on in Hungary, what kind of steps, what kind of schedule we have of the transformation, the previous subsidy system. And then we will just ask, the professionals first, and this is the reason I ask very kindly, if you have journalists in the room, to please give the privilege for the professionals, the film professionals first, to have them the opportunity to question, the people here. And the second part of the discussion, we will give the possibility for the press to have questions about, what they would like to say and ask all these people. So first of all, just a quick short test, just give me, the functioning of your institution.
Supporting.
You have a microphone. You will have both.
Really supporting anything to do with film
in
Denmark that isn't education. I mean, that's the scope of what we do. But to give you a brief idea of how the film agency and the film policies work in Denmark, I think it's important to say there are some guiding principles. One principle is arm length, moving us as far away from the politicians as possible before making artistic decisions, as one bearing principle. The other is really an opinion as much as a principle that art and audience are not necessarily each other's enemies. And we have the privilege of covering the full sphere of films, or the palette of films, if you like. And that means basically we have two main ways of supporting feature films. We also do shorts, documentaries, pedagogical work, archives, cinematheque, etc. And we do it to the tune of about $100 million US a year of taxpayers' money. Two equally strong legs. One focusing in the interest of what you could call films of popular culture, and one on very strong artistic films. And how do you divide one from the other in advance before the film is done? You don't.
Well, often.
You don't. But you have two entrances to support, which is really the choice of the applicant. One, the commissioning system, which is basically a Danish system based on individual decision. I, the film commissioner, for a short period of time, thinks that...
What does mean short period of time?
Max of 5 years, usually start out with a 2-year term, and then it can be prolonged up to 5. You're gone, you can never do it again. And we at least...
You only have one choice, one chance.
Individual decisions are great for strong art. It's great for entering projects where you say that the driving force of this is what will it do to the art of making motion pictures. But some of our biggest audience successes have come from this support scheme. Susanne Bier is one great example of someone who's both won prizes and sold lots and lots of tickets. Lone Scherfi, who was last year nominated with an education, has been supported on this scheme and sold tons of tickets and actually made money. The other support scheme we just changed in the new film accord in November, but is really aimed at films where audience are in the center of the decision. We will not support this film if we don't believe it has a chance of achieving a great audience. And that is will be decided by a 5-person editorial board where we have placed people who know about marketing, about distribution, and about making films as the decision makers, who will eventually take a vote and say, this project is more interesting than that project. And that's the way of thinking in the system.
One quick question. Do you co-product with the public television in Denmark?
We have a strange, as in all European countries, have crazy systems for coordinating public broadcaster money and taxpayers' money through film agencies. And we have that as well. To give you an example, a typical Danish feature film will cost about 3 million euros to produce. About a fourth of the money will come from the Film Institute, about a fourth of the money from the public broadcaster, and the rest, distributors, advance, private equity, producers who go and mortgage their house to the chimney, like everywhere else. And as far as market is concerned, I mean, you started out by saying Hungary is a small country with a strange language. Well, Denmark is a smaller country with a much stranger language than Hungarian. And if you look over the last 20 years, I think you've been able to find the name of Denmark in film production with both commercial and artistic successes. So it can be done. We don't have a perfect system, but I think on a good day we have the system with the fewest number or the lowest number of imperfections, and that's perhaps where we are.
Just European, what's your budget in euros for a year?
70 million euros, words to that effect.
70?
70.
7-0.
7-0, yeah.
It's very important to remember.
But we also have many other things to do than supporting films. I think for film support as such, there's about 50 million euros a year if you combine fiction, shorts, documentaries, and some TV series as well.
All right.
And we do 25 feature films a year.
Uh-huh.
And on top of that, 6, 7, 8 co-productions with
big international co-productions.
Our great friends in Croatia and sometimes in Austria and very often in Scandinavia or Germany.
Right. Thank you. Just one more quick. How many employees are busy with the audiovisual industry in Denmark? Can you have an estimated number of people who are in the audiovisual industry, approximately?
I don't think the figures that are out makes much sense. I mean, they go into several thousands, but what worries me is I saw a statistic from the Directors Association, and they claimed they had 365 members as active directors. Considering that we make 25 to 30 films a year, that seems to worry me a bit. So it's not a big industry, but relative to the country's size, important.
Okay. Voye? What's the short story of the Audiovisual Center? Just really short. I mean, take it brief.
Yeah, I'll be really short. Everybody. Thanks for calling me. I'm here probably also as a good example that there are also the smaller and not necessarily the richer countries than Hungary is, and still we have this pretentious idea of having an audiovisual industry and doing the job one way or another. In such a small country, and not a rich country, it's extremely hard, to put all ends together, To run audiovisual industry in such a small country, it's like making love in a Trabant or something. It requires a certain kind of yoga, which is not physical but mental. And I would say it refers to this kind of intelligence, which I would call a social intelligence. You must have, everybody in community around the same goal. And this was a difficult thing to achieve for my country, and we had about 20 years of winding the road, of examining different systems, At the end of the communism, we copy-pasted, state foundations from Western Germany, actually. Then the new established government, after we regained the independence, declared that it is expensive, politically suspicious, and fishy from many points, So they appointed the one person, one very established and very able director-producer to stand as a film commissioner, actually to run the one-man show. And seemingly, I don't know much about the Hungarian situation in detail, but seemingly there are some comparisons,
Oh, yeah.
And so on those terms, maybe I can save you some time, saying that it was the 10 worst years of Croatian cinema ever, just because the system was not fertile, and the procedure was untransparent. There was a lot of malcontent, and debate about audiovisual was always tend to be very much political debate, which is not good. What we believe now very much is that we must establish audiovisual policy and Croatian audiovisual model, which will be above any political dispute. We don't believe that there can be, especially in such a small country, a left-wing way of running the show and right-wing way of running the show. You cannot change the system every 4 years. Politics is very whimsical, and the art is a very long thing. And so that's how, step by step, we managed to establish a structure that's called Croatian Audiovisual Center, which is, stealing, with no copyright, many ideas from Denmark. And now we have a very small institution that's actually of the size of a documentary crew, not bigger, but with a lot of help from the guilds. On one side, from the professionals, it's funded, actually, on the work of professional organization. And on the other side, we have a state as a partner. And the third part of the triangle is the commercial sector and televisions, of course. That's how our, council is constituted, And what we do, we are trying to produce as harmonically as we can in this narrow space that we have, both the films that will run for some audience, and, of course, to cherish what is, the best thing to do for a little country in Europe.
How many films a year?
This year we had a little bit hungry because we had some difficulties in putting our new law in order, which is now set up and works. Which means the hard thing was to collect all the money from all the contributors and to learn to society to comply and to participate. Because the system is made like that. The half of the money comes from the taxpayers. It's the 5 million euro, comes from the taxpayers. Another half comes from the public television that are obliged to give us 2% of their television income. Commercial televisions that are obliged to give us 0.8% of their income, which means advertising.
The whole income?
What?
The brutto income?
Yes, the brutto income. And then there is a portion that comes from telecoms, from the IPTV and other audiovisual stuff they have in trade.
The mobile operators and the internet?
Mobile operators and internet, especially internet and IPTV, because IPTV is very high in...
How many percent?
What?
How many percent?
It's 40% in Croatia right now. And of course, it's future that's going to completely change the landscape, because...
So altogether, what's your budget in India?
So it's supposed to be 10 million euro, Still, we don't have, for this year, we don't have money in the bank, But I think that we will end up with about 9 million euro.
Thanks a lot. Peter, what are you doing there in Vienna?
What we are doing, I'm on this side of these small two round tables, I'm the only one representing a regional fund. In front of me, I can see Oliver Rittweger from the Mitteldeutsche Medienförderung in Leipzig, which is a regional fund too. And I would say there are many differences, but there is one very important difference between national funds and regional funds in Europe. And there are more than 30 regional funds all over Europe. They are very important. That is that, in fact, regional funds are acting more international than national funds. because they have the interest to develop the audiovisual sector, the film industry in a certain region. If it is a land, if it is a city like Vienna, it's the same, but our main interest is to develop the audiovisual field in Vienna. Vienna has about 1.8 million inhabitants. The budget of the Vienna Film Fund is 11.5 million euros. So in relation to the size of the region, this is one of the biggest regional funds in Europe, I would say.
How many films a year? Approximately.
About, if we count all the co-productions we are involved in, I would say about 30 feature films.
30?
Yeah. I mean, altogether,
all over,
and
all
the same amount of documentaries. Yeah. What seems important to me is that the jury of the Vienna Film Fund, which has taken the decisions about the project, is a completely independent jury. It's an international jury. It's not allowed to have Austrian producers or Austrian directors in the jury. So it cannot happen that somebody is leaving the room and waiting outside for the decisions his colleagues or his best enemies are doing about his project. And this is no comment about the Austrian Film Institute, but it was criticized in the last weeks that there are directors and producers deciding about projects by their colleagues. So in our jury at the Vienna Film Fund, you can find Eric Pleskov. I think everybody knows him. He's one of the most successful film producers in the 20th century, as well as a commissioning editor of CDF, Kleines Fernsehspiel, as well as...
How many people altogether?
We have 4 main members of the jury and 4 members, saying the deputy members. So in summer there are 8 members of the jury. And we have 4 meetings for the deadlines a year for the production and the development of feature films.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Simon, just a very quick overview of the Irish Film Board.
Well, yes, I should probably
budget, films, activities. Sorry.
I should probably mention that I'm not Irish. I am actually British.
Yeah.
And I think it's relevant because during the 90s, for 10 years, I ran a national film fund in the UK. And then for the last 5 years, I've been running the National Film Fund, the National Film Agency, in the Republic of Ireland. I mention that because it means that I have experience of working in a rather big country in European terms, the UK, and experience of working in a much smaller country, which is Ireland. Ireland is perhaps smaller than a lot of people realize. We're slightly smaller than Denmark, only 4 million people, and we speak an even stranger language, which is English.
Everybody sees that they have a specialist language. It's interesting.
Well, it's not a completely frivolous remark because, yes, English sometimes for this film or that film very occasionally can give you privileged access to the international market. But most of the time, if you're making films in English, in a small country with a very specific culture like Ireland, you are competing head-on with the countries that are making many more films, one country in particular is making a lot of films in roughly the same language, and you are competing directly with all that material that's coming into your multiplex cinemas and which the audience, recognizes as mainstream cinema. That's a very tough challenge. Now, what are we trying to do in Ireland on behalf of our cinema with our National Film Fund? I'll just try to explain that, I think. We have, by the way, about 17 million euros per year, 17 million, for selective investment in films. And then we also have a tax incentive, which is automatic. And that's available to any film or television program that comes to shoot in Ireland.
And the Irish system has always been based on a combination of selective support through the Irish Film Board and automatic support via the tax incentive. And we've always seen that for the Irish film industry and for Irish filmmaking, these two types of support were absolutely essential. The Irish Film Board has as its objectives primarily the culture of Irish cinema. We have cultural objectives. We also have industrial objectives. We want to make sure that new facilities companies can thrive in Ireland, that new skills can grow up among the technicians. But primarily what we're about is getting Irish culture onto the screen through the new, strong voices of Irish filmmakers. Why are we doing that? Well, we're doing it in the hope that we will make some films which will achieve a very large public and may even make some money. And the money that we invest is provided in the form of equity. But I must say that more and more, given the state of the market, it is soft equity. It's very soft equity. We don't expect to make large returns, monetary returns, on the investments that we make. However, there's the odd exception, I'm happy to say. You might know of a little Irish film called Once, which was a very big success about 4 years ago. We have a film which is showing tonight in Panorama Special, which was an opening film in Sundance recently called The Guard, and that is already selling to most countries of the world, and it's very exciting, and it's sold in North America. So, occasionally we will see decent money back from the films that we invest in. But we take a much broader view and a more cultural view of the investments we make. We reckon that we are making investments in people. We're making investments in artists. We're making investments in the artists, the artistic voices and talents of the future, who are, if you like, the national assets of Ireland's future. This is what we're really investing in more than in a particular number or a particular financial return. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that, we also recognize, and I'm sure this will strike a chord with you, that the culture of a country, when it travels abroad, whether it's, in our case, Irish music, Irish theatre, Irish literature, Irish poetry, and now more and more, I'm happy to say, Irish film, this projects an image of the country which makes the country seem, we hope, vibrant, alive, open for business, interesting to work with, interesting to make diplomatic relationships with, and perhaps interesting to visit. So there are what are recognized, I think, now as invisible earnings to be derived from a country's arts, a country's culture, when that culture travels all over the world. And we have managed successfully to get our government in Ireland to understand this. And even though it's very difficult to measure, these are invisible earnings, and you can't say how much money is derived every year from trade that is stimulated by the fact that people have felt Ireland is familiar because they've seen Irish films, they've listened to Irish music and enjoyed it. You can't exactly measure it, but you know it's true. And you know also that diplomatic relationships are eased and helped by virtue of the fact that Ireland seems familiar, that the Irish sense of humor is perhaps, known to people, that people like that black stuff called Guinness, which is recognized as an Irish product. These things help. They smooth the path. And we can measure this a little bit, the returns in terms of tourism. People who choose Ireland as a holiday destination because they've seen Ireland on screen, that's an enormous source of revenue for the country. So with our little funds at the Irish Film Board, we reckon we're trying to make an exponential effect. Yes, the occasional film will make money. We invest in a business-like way. By the way, we share all the money we do get back on the films that we invest in. We share 50-50 with the producer, which is a very basic principle of something I introduced. But beyond the cash that we might make back, we're looking at the investment that we're making in the people, the artists, the national assets of the future, and we're looking at the invisible earnings, but the very real earnings that are derived from having an image of Ireland as a country and as a culture projected via film all over the world.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. So we had many aspects of this subsidy systems in Europe, and we saw, it was very interesting, the Croatian example, how to raise up money not directly from the taxpayers, but other revenues. The telecom providers. It's very interesting what Simon said about the brand building effects of the film industry, of a national culture.